All right, so a lot of people in the room, still plenty to come in, but we will get ourselves started. So as I said, corporate partners and partners on the screen in front of you, big thank you, as always, to those people for the continued support and assisting us with the ARC360 webinar series. And we, again, as always with these things, I like to kind of issue our little disclaimer. Again, very much aware that the situation is evolving rapidly in terms of pandemic and its impact on the sector, and it's just a little protection mechanism for our panelists really as they participate week in, week out. So just read it out loud. The views and opinions expressed during the following webinar are those of the individual contributor and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the contributor's employer, organisation, committee or other group or individual. Little side note there, please respect all contributions, and we encourage you all to join the conversation via the interactive functions available. So again, familiarise yourself. If you're new to the Zoom webinar, we've got the Q&A panel and we've got the chat function. Again, great to see so many people already joining in with conversation. So here we are, week 8 of the webinars, and again, just to apply a little bit of context in terms of these webinars, you know, the most important thing out there at the moment is people's health and well-being. That is, you know, that cannot be disputed, and that's a primary concern amongst all of us during this time. However, kind of what started really as a humanitarian crisis has soon turned into a kind of global economic emergency, and many industries, are faced with challenges, and certainly our own being one of those. So again, we're on the cusp what we think could potentially be change. We've obviously got big announcements pending on Sunday, which possibly could be the easing of restrictions on lockdown. There seems to be a sense of people gearing up to return to work. I think kind of anecdotally, and I'm sure we'll come on to the actual sort of data, but there seems to be an increase in traffic on the roads. This week on Monday, we had the bounce back loan scheme introduced, which was available for people to apply, and we'll hear more about that. And as I've already mentioned, we've got 2 sort of big reports revealed today in terms of industry insight. So joining us, we've got Gary Barker, Claims Director of AA Insurance. We've got Mark Bull, Director of Auto Body Projects and Trend Tracker. We've got Ian Pugh, who's back with us, Managing Director of Fix Auto UK. And of course, we got Chris Weeks, Executive Director of the NBRA. So we'll work our way around. We'll keep things sort of brief for the introduction, but Gary, I'll come to you first. You joined us on week 1 of the webinar, back on the 18th of March. So again, if you could just give us a little bit of an insight really into your kind of journey in the past 7 weeks or so.
Yeah, it's been very strange, as I'm sure it has been for everybody. That's the one thing we've all got in common, I guess, is we've never, any of us, been in a pandemic before, so it's all new ground. I think when I spoke at this event last, we were trying to get all of our people onto a home working setup, which we weren't geared up to do before that, or most of our business wasn't. We managed to do that pretty quickly, and we've been in that pattern. In fact, we did it just before the lockdown started, so we were 98% of our business was working from home and able to look after our customers then. So from that point on, without too much interruption in service to customers actually, which was great. And since then, we've been focusing on trying to look after our people first and make sure that they're not feeling too isolated. It's really weird. Funnily enough, it seems to be the younger people. Sorry, I'm smiling because the very childish person in the audience, Neil, you know who you are, is sending me silly messages. So they seem to have adapted to it better, and we do a survey every fortnight of all of our staff, and they're adapting to it. I hate it. I hate working from home and being sort of trapped in this chair. So a lot of our work has been on trying to make sure that everybody's well-being is where we need it to be. And now we're starting to turn our thoughts to how do we adjust to what this new normal might be like. We know that we track frequency claim volume frequency very closely. We have access to the AA's data, which incidentally, when you see the government briefing, that's the same data, the motor data, it's the same. And I think it feels to us like we're about halfway back in the bounce back in claims. We're definitely on a climb back up. It's just for us, the challenge is trying to understand what will the angle of that ascent back up to the new normal level be, and where will the new normal level settle? So that's what we're trying to get our head around at the moment.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Gary. Chris, I'll come to you. Just a little bit of an insight from you in terms of, I suppose, the last week, really. What's been happening within the MBRA?
Well, of course, I've been involved in these, the survey and the hub meeting that you had, which I'm sure we'll go through today, which has been very interesting. As far as our members go, it's been sort of providing them some insight into the bounce back loan, which I think, pretty much is a no-brainer. If you can go for it, any of the government loans at the moment, provided you can get through. And we've heard a lot of feedback that the banks are really struggling with the demand, enormous amount of demand from all the businesses, obviously. But the loans do look very attractive at the rates that they're in. So we've been supporting our members with that. And I've also been on lots of calls with our members who are in the process of ramping up their business again, or starting to at least get ready for it. I'm sure we'll go through in the survey the numbers or proportions that are getting involved in that. But, just the process of getting your admin staff in, calling the customers, getting the VDAs in, estimating the vehicles, trying to get the parts there. So more and more of them are focusing on that process of getting prepared to be able to do more work again. So that's where a lot of our focus has been this week, really.
Great stuff. Ian, we'll come to you. A couple of weeks ago, you joined us, and I understand you've made some good contacts out of it. A lot of people have been in touch because you shared some great insight into the grant schemes that were available. So last couple of weeks in terms of activity for yourself and Fix Auto?
Yeah, so I guess when we last spoke, the key focus for us as an industry, as I said before, was cash flow and cash retention. So it's great having discounts off of next year's fees or next year's prices, but that's jam tomorrow. This is about cash now. So our focus is about how do we, help our shops secure business grants and business rate relief. Now, my team have been absolutely just laser focused on that one thing. So that's the one thing that we've done, is just nail that time and time again. So the more we did it, the more we developed learning expertise, and the more we understood then how inconsistent each local authority was. So we've had loads of challenges, and the key thing for me was not to give up. So in some instances, I don't know if you guys have seen on LinkedIn, but we actually went to the media. We wrote to Boris Johnson for one of our franchisees, and we went to the local media newspapers who took the story on, and within 24 hours we had the grant approved. So I think our last call here was a couple of weeks ago. I think we were about 360,000 in grants. So to date now we're 700,000 in business grants. So I'd set a target for my team and myself to achieve 1 million. So we're currently at 700,000. But in terms of what also has happened, because we've got the business rate relief of 25 grand, you've automatically got entitlement then to the business, sorry, we got the business grant, but you've also automatically got entitlement to the business rate relief. So at the moment, we've got about £800,000 of business rate relief. So what that is that simply you get an invoice from your local authority with your business rates. And on this one, for example, it's £14,000, but with a £14,000 credit. So it's a nil invoice charge for the next 12 months. So the grant will give you cash today. So the shops get the £25,000 grant. So they get immediate cash in their bank within about 3 days. Now, as I said before, as a body shop owner, it's fantastic from a £25,000 contribution, But then what you then do is you then take a further 14, 15, in some instances it's about 20,000, 25,000 business rate relief for the following 12 months. So I think our key focus has been purely about supporting our shops, working with them just to nail that grant, because the grant is free money. There's no conditions on it. There's no payback. It's not a loan. So it's there for you as a body shop, providing you can support, demonstrate the criteria that that you are a retail operation.
All right, we'll come back on a few other pieces in a second, Ian, because I know you've been working hard on other things this week as well. Mark Bull, your last week, well, we've been working on various projects, but just give an insight in terms of what you've been up to.
Yeah, basically within the last week, we've been doing the follow-up survey to the first survey that we've done at the initial point of COVID about sort of 4 weeks ago. So the follow-up's been going on. We've had around 178 responses. And then Monday night, just to have a quick turnaround, I was beavering away, doing all of the graphs and analysis, so that we could provide the sort of latest position of the marketplace, really. So that's been my week
to date. All right, great stuff. Now, again, we will delve into some of the sort of highlights, if you like, from the various surveys, but come back to you first, Gary, in terms of kind of data, traffic volumes, claims volumes. Can you give us a little bit more insight there into what's kind of, the current situation is, what you've seen over the last week or so?
Yeah, I think it varies. So we have our own claims frequency, and then we have the AA's driving data. That not quite fully aligned, but they're not far off. And what we've seen is from the point immediately after the lockdown, I think traffic reduced almost immediately to about 40% of normal. Claims lower than that. I think there's some sort of effect of when miles driven reduces, that claims frequency drops beyond that. I think it's to do with the density of vehicles on the road. I don't know the full detail behind it. What we've seen since is that sort of bubbling along in a flat line for a little while, and then over the last 3 to 4 weeks, increasing, almost doubling, the increase almost doubling each time. So where we're at now is about 50% of normal. I know in our network, our instructions to our network have doubled this week, over the last week rather. So it's definitely the case that more customers are looking to get their vehicles repaired. I can't be absolutely sure whether some of this is stored up demand from accidents that had happened earlier, and where customers are reluctant to get into the repair process for whatever reason, or whether it's immediate demand. It's not that easy for us to tell, but there is a definite increase. We've had community. I was talking to Chris before this went live. We've done a survey to our network this week as well, and we've had a number of repairers who already told us. We've phoned our network every fortnight as well since lockdown started to establish what their position is, and we've had a number of repairers contact us to say that they are now back open and looking for work. So it's definitely on the increase. We can see that in our phone stats, in our claims data, and in our mileage data. I guess the imponderable is, as I mentioned earlier, what is the angle of that, the flight path of that going to be, and when will it flatten out again? That's what's not clear to us.
Yeah. And Ian, I'll come back to you on that one. Again, a couple of weeks ago, you sort of suggested anecdotally, and you'd also seen from the data set, you'd seen a slight sort of uplift in claims coming through. Again, same pattern occurring the last couple of weeks?
No. So for May, so the early figures in May is a slight dip. So there's a slight reduction. So I guess the key bit, as Gary's trying to say, is what's in that data, because what we've got is we've got a lot of original work in progress. We've got a lot of immobile VORs that are being delivered to the shops. And then we've got notification claims. So I think if we look at our shops, I think anecdotally people are saying 40% in May, but I think that's a false positive, because I think 40% turnover in May is based on a backlog of VORs, WIP, and also some instructions. Now, the problem with that is that once that WIP's hoovered up, then actually what's the real run rate? So is that so from a claims perspective, I think what we've got to be careful of is false positives. So we need to ensure that if our ethanol is running at 80% or 75% of original, then, and that hasn't really changed, if we're then saying, well, we're going to be 40% in May on volume, I think the reality is we're probably going to be 20%. So I think there's going to be a surge in repair volume. So body shops might say, okay, we're open for the next maybe 4 weeks. But I think beyond 4 weeks, I don't think we truly know. That's kind of our instinct at the moment. So that links into furlough planning and bringing people back from retention. So how quickly do you bring back staff and productives body shop? Because it might be 40% in May, which for me is a false positive in terms of false indicator, when actually if the run rate is actually 30% or less, then we don't want to release guys and people from retention too early back into the business. That's the thing. It's how do we resource model that? That's the tricky bit. So I guess it's as Gary said, it's trying to work out what is actually genuine new claims, what is VORs that have been booked in and stored up, and then what's the WIP, because that's the trick, is not bringing back people too soon.
Yeah, I think there's another dynamic floating around there, Ian, as well, because you're absolutely right. I think if you start to look at the growth of claims and you start to project how you bring people back into your business on the back of it, you could make some fairly accurate assumptions. But the bit that's messing with it as well at the moment is the number of body shops that are open and those that are closed. So, you know, you've had body shops that are kind of closed and have been getting sort of instructions coming through. You've got those that are reopening and aren't getting work because they didn't stay open throughout the COVID period. And then you've got those that have remained open, that are looking at the work that they've had coming through, where they've picked up in other zones, and they're starting to lose those. So there's a real grey area around the way that body shops that were closed are being treated at the moment. Some work providers are giving them the work instantly when they open. Some of them appear to be holding it back and giving it to the people that did stay open. So there's some real mix of stuff out there, and I think it's playing with that dynamic of as the claim volumes increase. I don't know exactly what the right answer is either, because, you know, I think some body shops are being seen as having been loyal, staying open. But at the same time, if other body shops hadn't closed down or pretty much closed down, they wouldn't have been able to survive through this period. So I think everyone has had a part to play in this, be it if they stayed open or if they closed. And don't forget, a lot of them closed not just for financial reasons, but for social responsibility, looking after their staff and the welfare of their staff. So I think nobody should be seen as a villain throughout this, whether they stayed open or they remain closed. I think we really need to look at all the body shops with compassion as they come out of this.
Yeah, absolutely right there. It was kind of a moral dilemma for many at the outset, and balanced off against obviously the commercial pressures behind it. So it's not been an easy one for many people. Coming back to the point on furlough, there's some good sort of tools around. I know there's one on Repair Talks, backed by Sherwin Williams, I think, which helps you kind of work out when and how to bring people back into the business. Chris, I'll come to you on this one. Again, you know, one of perhaps the challenges is those who did close, furloughed all staff in one go. Therefore, you know, working on 3-week blocks kind of have got to reintroduce them. Phased, others phased out on furlough. So what's your kind of thinking around there, really? What's the feedback been?
It's a very difficult decision for body shops to be making. So they're looking at the amount of work that's building up, getting the parts in. Obviously, they don't want technicians into the business until they've got the work ready to be repaired. You can extend the furlough period, obviously. But once you bring people back off of a furlough, you can only put them back on again for 3 weeks. And this is one of the issues that we feel isn't helping our industry, certainly. So only today, we've written to the Chancellor asking for some more flexibility around the furlough system, more in line with the French system, where you can look at the whole period and bring people on and off and for short periods of time. Because I think we do need more flexibility. Body shops will inevitably be bringing technicians and staff back off of the furlough process because they've got backed up work, possibly, as Ian says, due to a false positive, thinking they've got about 40%, and that will die off, and then they'll have technicians that are not productive and have to absorb that cost. So it's a very, very, it's a very delicate act, you know, and I think a lot of them are erring on the side of caution and bringing less people back out of the furlough process than they potentially need. And that might be the right thing to do at the moment.
Ian, come back to you. We've just had a question through about information to obtaining a grant. People keep coming up against resistance, and again, we'll kind of go on to it in a second in terms of the survey results. But it was a kind of recurring theme that there were certain challenges. Where can people find your information or contact you?
Yeah, I mean, on the last webinar, we said that we'd happily provide the information out to the network, to non-fixed auto shops, to the industry, because ultimately what we're trying to do is keep the industry alive. So we've had a lot of requests and we've also had a lot of success. I think at the moment on business grants that we've secured for non-fixed auto shops, I think we're about 100 grand. So we've actually made some really good friends off the back of this. So what we're going to do, rather than us have individual requests, is we're setting up an email box so that it would be effectively like COVID grant support at fixauto.co.uk. So what we'll do is the templates that we'll put it on there. So if you email into that email box, then we'll respond with the templates. So it makes it easier for you guys, you know, just to share. All I want to do is share our learnings and our experiences with everybody. Because as I say, this is now fundamentally a war effort. It's not necessarily about commerciality. So for me, this is, if I can share all of our experiences, you know, we've been to the press, we've leveraged the press to get to get grants done and get grants approved. And we've also learned from each other as well. So a lot of our shops have had some really good ideas and we've taken their ideas too. So all I want to do is just kind of transfer that knowledge out to the industry. I'm not saying we're by any means subject matter experts. We're not. We've learned over the last 7 weeks. We didn't understand what furlough was when we first started, or business grants or business rate relief. So, you know, and we're more than happy to share that. And equally with the bounce back loans, that was announced on Monday. So we're going to be, we're already on with that now, because again, it comes back to, it's about immediate cash and cash support for a business. You know, so yeah, we'll make that available. So I'll get that, we'll get that sorted so that it's available for everybody.
Great stuff. Thanks, Ian. Gary, I'll just come back to you on this one. So, you know, we're obviously talking about kind of, you know, cash flow, grant schemes. We talked about the claims volumes and things from a kind of almost, you know, a human resource management and a you know, a personnel perspective within a corporate organization like yourself. You know, how important is that bit to get right in terms of reintroducing people into the business and how to go about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really fine balance to strike, because, you know, the real difficult problem to solve is the one that Ian and Chris have already mentioned. There's a huge unknown factor about the pace of any return to normality. So, I mean, we have used the furlough scheme, but only really very light touch. The AA as a whole has used the scheme, but again, not in a huge way, because the bulk of the AA is in a key worker status anyway, being involved in transport and logistics. So it perhaps affects us less than it would, say, a body shop that's furloughed all of its staff in one go. But it's really difficult, and doing things in these 3-week tranches. We're at the end of a tranche at the end of this week. Before I came onto this call, that's precisely what I was sorting out. And we're doing it in the midst of launching quite a big IT project as well. So there's all sorts of interaction with training and testing and all sorts of stuff. That it's a Rubik's Cube trying to get all of this together and make sure that people, are coping with working alone and all of the technical challenges that working from home creates. So it's no more difficult for us than it is anybody else, but I think it's difficult for everybody.
Yeah, sure. Okay, right. We will let's have a little look at. I'll just share the screen there. So we'll have a little look at the surveys now. Mark Bull, I shall let you talk us through these. So just give a little overview in terms of the survey or the report.
Yeah, it's a lovely cover first of all, but no, we got 178 responses, as I said earlier, and the slightly down on the last set of responses because a lot of the around 30 to 40 sub £1 million shops didn't respond to this one. So we've got a slightly different sort of profile, but nevertheless it's all statistically sort of correct, etc. And there's a number of things that stand out, and I don't know what slides you're going to show, Mark, but
here we go.
Yeah,
well, the first one for me was reference to those who, in the initial survey, had temporarily closed their business.
Yeah.
And what I thought was interesting is in terms of who had reopened and the kind of timeline that people are working to, which we've already alluded to.
Yeah, and it's just to reiterate, really, not surprised, I guess, but many of the shops are gearing up to reopen. And I guess if there was one surprise on that graph, was that sort of many are still waiting to see exactly what the government are going to do before they plan their next move. But I would expect that if we're looking at that graph, the sort of two columns that stand out, the 21.8 and the 29.9% columns, most shops are going to be back open next week after the bank holiday. And then it is a matter of, going through what the guys have said about sort of reintroducing staff, etc.
All right. Oh, sorry.
I guess those two graphs are both the same around the sort of rates relief and the grants that are available. Ian's touched on them, Chris has as well. Just surprised me really about the number of body shops that haven't applied. Now there are reasons for some of them, i.e. that fall outside the criteria, etc. But there was still confusion in the market. There's still a number of shops that didn't know whether they could apply, what was applicable. Should it be a grant? Should it be the rate? Should it be what's business interruption loan? So again, I'd point them towards Chris really at NEBA or Ian for the work that he's doing. But I was just surprised how many had, sort of not bothered to go through the process, bothered to look into it. And then the other surprise is that where people have been successful and people that haven't, or businesses that haven't. Because again, there's confusion within the local authorities as to whether body shops can or can't get the relief, and that's where Ian's been successful in actually applying sort of more pressure, not taking no for an answer, and just making sure that they get the money that they need.
Chris, is that a surprising kind of split for you in terms of those who have applied, those who haven't, and those who are having issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is around the over £51,000 rateable value. Like I said, we've, just like Ian, consistently been putting messaging support and draft letters, arguments against sort of councils that have come back, because the grant is pretty much an automatic with the rates relief or vice versa. So I think a lot of, probably half of that was to do with the size of the rateable value of the business. But there will be a lot that just haven't even tried yet. Even still, we're getting requests through from repairers that we thought probably would have done this a lot sooner to start getting involved in it. So, as Ian says, it is a war situation, a bit like what we thought was going to happen previously with the sort of parts and with the
Brexit.
With Brexit, yes. Yeah, we are in a bit of a war situation. I think, you know, if it wasn't for the relief that's been out there, the rates relief, the furlough especially, the 25k grants, you know, now the bounce back loan and the VAT relief, you know, so many would have failed already. And I do think, you know, the government has done an amazing job, really, of jumping in and providing some support for the repairers here. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, if anyone needs any support as well, you know, equally, if you're a member, we've got lots of support out there for a body shop that still hasn't done it.
Ian, do any of those numbers kind of stand out for you in terms of those who have applied, those who haven't, those who have experiencing trouble? Is it kind of similar within the network, or was it originally?
I think it's fair to say that you know, this is uncharted territory for body shops. This is red tape, it's bureaucracy, it's government, local authority. So what we've had to do is we've done a lot of webinars to try and help support them. We've done a lot of phone calls direct. In fact, we've actually rang the councils ourselves and done it. We've been copied in emails. So again, not just within Fix Auto, but outside as well. So, so some of the guys outside of the network, independents, have been trying to help them. So it's easy to give up. But I think when you put that 25 grand grant, which is free money, into your cash flow forecast, you then couple that with a business rate relief, which some of the guys have had quite a significant amount of support on that. It's probably the number one thing that you need to do, because cash, it's not about profit and loss now or turnover. It's about cash management and cash flow. When the cash is coming in, when the cash is going out. If it's going out, do I need to pay it? You know, do I need to pay these people? If they're government, do I really need to pay the government? You know, so I think the government has done a great job in terms of VAT deferrals, you know, and all the kind of the flow support. But it is there, and it's there to be taken. And I think I said on the call a couple of weeks back, it will stop. They will close this in the same way that will close furlough, because the government can't continue to support. So I'd urge everybody, if they're struggling with it, just drop us an email. I've put the email on the system, but I will, Mark, I'll send you the email formally. So the COVID grant support email at fixauto.co.uk, and we'll share with it. I've got my guys there, my team. You know, my team, 75% of my team are furloughed, but the rest of the team are there just mainly doing this, because that's all I've said is that's the number one priority for us as a business, because we own body shops as well. We can see it. When we do a cash flow forecast, we can see what £25,000 does to a business, and that's alive through this process. So some webinars, like now, similar technology to this, and the shops have been great, and we've been sharing ideas. And where they have hit a roadblock, you know, one of our franchisees in Scotland is struggling, but we've used the Slough press release as a battering ram for the local authority in Scotland. We're overwhelming the authorities with data, is what we're doing. But you know, but I'm happy to help. You know, at the end of the day, we're happy to help anyone that wants our support. It's not it's not
great stuff, guys. Well, one of the points, or certainly some of the comments to stem out of this, there were various points around the cut-off for rates relief, £51,000 was it? So some of the body shops obviously fall into kind of a, I don't know, for want of a better term, a medium-sized category. Chris, is there any sort of insight on how to, you know, workarounds there, or how does that work?
I don't think there are any workarounds, but again, and this is across the RMI piece. This wasn't just the MBRA. We jointly wrote to the Chancellor asking for it to be extended to those businesses that are over 51,000. So we've had acknowledgement of that letter, but we've not sort of seen any change in it yet. I don't think there's any workarounds, and we are sort of providing, you know, we are giving some pressure to the government to, you know, because it's a finite thing, isn't it? You know, so much relief for those with a rateable value, and it doesn't always necessarily, you know, relate directly to the value of the premises either. Some of them with a higher value premises have got a rateable value under 51,000, and some and vice versa. Can I just pick up on one other point, actually, Mark? And it might be one sort of point that Gary series is on, representing the insurer world. I do take Ian's point, you know, wholeheartedly, that, you know, the biggest area, the quickest win and the biggest thing that a body shop can do at the moment is gain access to cash through the various kinds of government schemes that are available at the moment. You know, but I kind of still want to ask, you know, at the end of the day, repairers do work, and they're doing work for insurers and accident management companies and work providers. Whether that sector has done enough to support body shops through it, you know, should it all be the government? You know, in my view, and what I hear all the time is repairers are effectively subsidising the repair through this period. You know, I know it's not all about P&L, but you know, they've got the same overheads to absorb with fewer repairs. They've got increased collection costs. They've got vastly increased PPE costs at the moment. You know, some of the prices of masks and all of the equipment that's necessary to continue repair through this period have massively increased. The average cost of an assessment has increased massively. Their vehicle fleet, when you look at it per job, has also increased massively. You know, reduced discounts on parts, average of 6-7%. So, you know, they're losing their margin on parts. Yes, some of that has been given back. Gary, are you doing enough to help repairers?
I think that's a difficult question, Chris. I'm sure all of the repairers on the discussion would say no, perhaps. And I don't really know the answer. So within our own network, we try to keep in touch with our network, or certainly have been trying to keep in touch with our network pretty frequently throughout this lockdown period. We've been presented with additional charges for cleaning, which we've paid. That's completely reasonable. And I'm sure we're open for discussion where repairers can demonstrate that they've had to take on an additional cost in relation to a repair. I think the bigger question that you're asking, Chris, and I think this is a more difficult one to answer, is where is the responsibility for supporting our supply chain? Does it sit with government or does it sit with insurers? Now, I think there's a perception in the market that insurers, motor insurers, are benefiting from this because of reduced claim frequency. That might be the case for a very short period, but that will be competed away very, very quickly. Prices are already dropping. So if you see the data on price comparison websites, we operate in a hyper competitive market. So any advantage will be competed away, or it will be given back to customers, which is where there is absolutely no question insurers have got an obligation to customers through various schemes, whether that's something like the Admiral Premium Refund. A couple of other insurers are adopting a premium refund. LV announced yesterday they're adopting a hardship fund. I think DLG are going to do the same. From tomorrow, we're waiving all excesses for compulsory excesses for customers for an indefinite period, so that we can support them. Now, the FCA expects us to support our customers in these times of hardship. The perceived benefit will be transient. I can promise you that. The market has demonstrated time and time again that any advantage of that nature will just be competed away and premiums will come down. And of course, they should come down. That is what consumers will expect. So how can an insurer justify to its shareholders that spending additional money supporting its supply chain is more important or as important than spending money supporting its customers? Now, if I can tell you from a practical point of view, the things that we've done that we think will help. We've been trading for 3 years. We can't simply pay more for everything. We just can't afford it, but we can pay faster. So we've been on a 24-hour turnaround for our payments. Somebody will probably tell me I got this wrong, I'm sure, but I think within a week of lockdown starting, if repairers are really struggling and they want to talk about stage payments so they can pay for parts separately, then we're happy to have that discussion as well. We already help our network out considerably by providing courtesy vehicles for them when they're not able to do it. So I think it's a really, really tough balance to strike
I do get it. Like, I mean, you know, I'm certainly not suggesting that, you know, the benefit from insurance of not having claims should be passed to repairers. Okay, and I don't also think it's the insurer or underwriter world's obligation to really sort of support body shops through this in any way other than the fact that they are seeing their own increased cost per claim. So most of them are tied into contracts, which they've gone into willingly, that are effectively, you know, heavily discounted on the basis of volume, the kind of volume that they would normally expect, and they can work out their P&L and they can manage to make a small margin on the basis of that volume. When that volume disappears, you know, that contract, it's not invalid. It doesn't serve the right purpose anymore. And I think where body shops are absorbing increased costs at the moment, they're not being met. You know, there may be.
Well, I think there's no question that they've got additional costs there, Chris. I'm sure that's true, and we know from the discussion that we've already had that there's a lot of additional support from the government to help offset those costs. That the difference is that the difficulty is in the balance of where one should step in to the other, and I think that needs discussion between repairers within repair networks and the insurer. One of the questions on the Q&A board to be answered is, you know, we've got cleaning charges, and I think what it says is that we can't get an answer quickly from an insurer. Well, an insurer should be able to provide that answer. And I think if repairers approach their, well, I can't speak for all insurers, I'm not here representing the insurance industry, I'm just talking about us, then we'll have that discussion. What I am saying is it's very unlikely, I think it's really, really unlikely that any individual insurer is going to accept a blanket significant hike in cost just en masse. I don't think that's very likely.
That's good. We'll if we can, we'll go back to the surveys, because I think what you're kind of you know, hinting at is reflected certainly in the sort of sentiment piece we did with ARC360 Hub on Friday. In terms of, you know, significant change to the industry, but we'll bring that slide up in a second. I think it's one that we've got, but that's great. Fantastic debate there. So just come back to you, Mark. 6 weeks into lockdown. So what you can see on the screen, how confident are you now that business can withstand the financial impact of the pandemic?
Yeah, there was this slide, Mark, and there's also one on the confidence for the latter half of this year, for the second half of the year. Yep, it's quite clear from both, really. There's around, I mean, the optimistic side is that there's around this sort of 60% that are cautiously confident going forward, but 20% are certainly less confident than they were at the outset, or just not confident at all. And that has to be a concern for sort of, you know, right across the industry, because these are not just the small shops. There's a mixed bag here, and the large shops also are in the categories of less confidence and no confidence at all. So we know there's a crisis. It's a matter of how it can be addressed, really. But this kind of paints the picture that a good number of shops are in severe difficulty.
And we'll just kind of whisk through these, really. So just to put a bit of context on the second report that we've got here, and these are available. We'll come on to that at the end, where you can find them. ARC360 Hub, we ran our inaugural event on Friday last week. So we had 29, if you like, industry influencers, those of being our corporate partners of ARC360, a select handful from ILC itself and ILC insurer partners, and some body shop invitees as well. So it was behind closed doors, Chatham House rules. We knew who was in the room, etc. But anything that was voted on or commented on was completely anonymous. So we've just posed a couple of scenario questions. These were very much based around the questions that we receive on a weekly basis from attendees in the webinar. Again, without kind of, you know, singling out individuals, it was we felt it might have been better taking it to a group panel. So changed significantly as a result of the pandemic. As you can see there, 76% believe it will, 24% otherwise. Again, these are just a few select highlights. Claims or motor claims volumes year on year in Q3 2020. The majority said there'd be 21% to 40% down still. Any thoughts on that from any of the panelists? Gary, does that kind of align with any thoughts or thinking or anything you've picked up from the insurance industry?
It's just anybody's guess, really, isn't it? I mean, if I was, I mean, there's no science behind this at all. I'd be really, really surprised if we were back at our pre-COVID frequency by the end of this year. I think we might get to 80%, maybe 90%. But if you think about how workplaces are likely to change permanently as a result of this pandemic, a lot of people have realized that they can work from home where they didn't previously think that they could. Surely that must have an impact on vehicle miles driven.
Yeah.
I would have thought.
Ian, any thoughts on that yourself? I mean, I know you were sort of saying last time we spoke, scenario planning, plan for the worst, and hopefully it can only get better.
I think, I mean, I'm doing some work in China at the moment, ironically. And it's interesting with China, if you look at the statistics coming out from China post-COVID, road traffic increased ahead of COVID volumes before, and public transport decreased. So public transport never got back to pre-COVID levels. So in China, what we're seeing is that consumers are saying, I'm actually going to drive a vehicle because of social distancing. So looking at, if we look at fact from because that's what we've got really from China, is road traffic seems to be ahead of the pre-COVID volumes, and the use of public transport is below that. So I think that's a nervousness amongst the population for social distancing. So, but I agree with Gary. I mean, worst case scenario, I've budgeted, being totally transparent with you guys, Q4, I think I'm 30% down. So we'll be 70% of the original volume. That's my budget. I'm hoping for, you know, I think also, and I don't mean to be mercenary here, but the school run contributes significantly to our industry. The traffic on the school run. So once the schools go back, parents then take their kids to school. The accident frequency does increase. So I'm being honest, and that's my view. So I think there's an optimism that we could be like China, whereby there's more people buying older vehicles just for travel, for social distancing, and that will increase traffic and miles driven per vehicle, because miles driven per vehicle and fuel price influence driver behaviour, and I think so that's kind of my view. My view is that, you know, my budget for Fix UK is that we'll be for Q4 will be 70% of the pre-COVID volume.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Ian. Very, very insightful stuff indeed.
Just interesting on Chris's point about the insurance companies and funding. Sorry, can I come back on that?
No. Yeah, please come.
It's interesting. So I've been looking at the vehicle breakdown industry, so recovery businesses, and what the industry there are doing is they're making advanced payments. So they're aggregating the payments based on Q1. So I don't know, using a vehicle breakdown business, they're being advance paid the average breakdown cost for Q1. So the insurance companies, are advance paying those guys to keep them alive. So I think that model could work, but I certainly agree with Gary, is that, you know, insurance companies are getting very competitive on aggregator sites, so they can't just jack up the premium to offset the difference. They're also getting hit on the travel insurance claims, lack of revenue on travel insurance, and also people claiming on their policies. So it's not as straightforward. But I think if we look at the vehicle breakdown industry, insurance companies there have said, okay, we want to keep this industry alive. We're going to advance pay these guys. So almost pro forma them. So they're paying before the repair. So I think, and I know we had conversations again with insurance companies about stage payments. It happens in the property market. you get stage payments. So I think in this instance, I think maybe there's some sort of Cobra stroke COVID team that come together with Thatcham and insurance companies to actually say, okay, let's work on something like that model that aggregates our claims costs over Q1, and we're going to pay that in advance to body shops in a very quick fashion, if not before the repair. So it helps fund the overheads and the expenses that Chris has spoken about, plus also the parts costs and everything else. So that's just an idea. And I think at the moment we need to have lateral thinking to a problem. I think we have to look at it from different dimensions. We're not in the situation we were 8 weeks ago. So I think there are solutions there, but I think we've just got to work together to find them.
And I think that's kind of been raised before, certainly along those lines, that train of thought. Again, as us kind of a neutral party in the industry, we'd be quite happily to sit at the centre of that and bounce around ideas behind closed doors. So we can certainly have a look at that for future. I'm just very conscious of time, guys, and I appreciate the conversation's been incredible today. So we'll just whistle through the rest of these results. Again, any commentary will come to you. So potential reduction in market volume capacity, complete overhaul of the approved repairer model. You can see from those 29 industry influencers, 64% suggested not, but again, who knows? It's kind of almost could it be a blank piece of paper situation? Accident repair costs will increase. 39% suspect yes, 18% decrease, and possibly, but again, will market competition apply a downward pressure? Which I think is something that's kind of in the back of most people's minds is when we get back to scaling up, will the competition between body shops be so great that it will be a real race to get some work, secure some volume? Repairer claims managers relationships could improve further. Again, this is a real positive to come out of all of this. 86% believe yes, 14% potentially not. But that's just an insight, again, very whistle-stop tour in terms of to very in-depth sort of reports and studies that have been published this week. Both are available. So Mark, your one's available to download from the Trend Tracker website?
Yeah, it's from the reports and data section. So there's a free download, so anybody can get it. Can I just say, Mark, whilst on it, it's going to come back to sort of having mature discussions, really, isn't it? Body shops are not going to sort of carry on the way they continue to trade the way they are, or also trade themselves out of business. They will need an increase in rates, they will need an increase in terms, and better negotiate the terms they buy at as well. So, but it's got to be an open and frank discussion. It's hard to see there can be a sort of denial that there's a problem out there, and the insurance companies do need the supply chain. They do need to sort of ensure quality repairs are undertaken for their policyholders, so they've got the responsibilities to ensure that the repairers are remunerated correctly.
All right, now a very whistle-stop round robin from four of you. For you individually, priority sort of business activity over the next 7 days, is it all pending Sunday's decisions and roadmap? Chris, come to you first.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to sort of respond to this as it goes, as it changes, as we have done all the way through it. I really agree with Ian. We do need some new models, things like prepaying a percentage of the invoice. From a cash perspective, is going to be critical for body shops as they come out of this. I think we haven't really even seen the real credit cash problem yet. It will come as the work starts to ramp up again. So we would definitely be prepared to get involved in that. I would just say out there, we've just gone around the houses on this a little bit, but I'm just asking for the work providers to be more flexible at the moment. I guarantee you repairers are subsidising repairs at the moment. And some of the charges they're putting in are getting bound, they're not even getting through the audit rules. So they're not even getting looked at, let alone discussed. So just let's have some flexibility out there, please. Use common sense and flexibility.
Great stuff. Gary, closing thoughts?
I haven't got a bloody clue what we're going to be doing for the next week. I don't know. we'll just have to wait and see. But what I would like to do is I'm certainly happy to get involved in a discussion. Ian, I've been very impressed with what you've been saying today. We've never met before, but perhaps you would too. Chris, I'm sure you would. Let's actually do it. Let's set up the COVID committee. I'm happy to get involved in it. And let's talk about what ideas are. There's all sorts of problems for insurers taking on additional credit risk. But it doesn't mean that they can't be resolved. So I'm happy to commit some time to it. And let's get it done.
That's brilliant. Brilliant. Great thoughts, Gary. Ian, just again, very quickly, I'm very conscious of time. We've got literally 2 minutes remaining. Yeah, the pending week, the week coming.
Yeah, so we're going to carry on pursuing grant relief. We're currently at 1.5 million. So we're going to put the documentation on that email so it's public. And obviously just work on our planning for the shops to bring back and transition back to volume, because it's that stepped process that's critical. I think there's 3 points in terms of time is August, December and March, because August is when we've got to pay for our parts, December is corporation tax bill time, and March is the VAT deferral from this year to next year. And I think those are the 3 pinch points from a finance point of view. But I think if we do nothing, ultimately it's about the industry will further consolidate. The businesses with strong balance sheets will just acquire and will create a smaller industry. So I think it's, but I do understand, my background is insurance, so I understand all the pressures on that too. So it's not a simple solution by any stretch. So. Brilliant.
And Mr. Bull, you can have a breather now. You've put the survey together.
Mr. Bull's week might be slightly easier. I shall gear up for VE Day and enjoy that. But and I'd like to thank everybody who sort of completed the survey. It is important that we sort of get that information out there as a sort of on block, because it does really, sort of paint the picture of where the industry stands at this moment in time. So, so thank you everybody for that. But no, I now hopefully will have an easier week than last week.
All right, super stuff. So you can see the chat coming through there. Some really great messages coming through. Really sort of open, candid discussion today. Again, more than happy to help pull these kind of meetings together and just sit at that kind of neutral point at the centre of it all and let it happen. So we will get working on that. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks for all the interaction. Chris, Mark, Gary and Ian. Anyone wants copies of any of the surveys and you can't find where they are, just drop me an email and I will forward them on. Again, I will forward on to Ian if you want any contact with Fix Auto UK as well. So thank you very much indeed, guys. Have a fantastic bank holiday weekend. Yay. And we'll see you all again next Wednesday. Take care all. Thank you.
Guys. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.